and good to see you on a Friday, although it's a bit wet and windy outside. So we just do apologies first of all, Mia.
Yep, we've got Commissioner Lady Wilcock, Chief Fire Officer Finn Monaghan, Dominic Meeker and Kate Harvard from them.
Okay, thanks very much. So any declarations of interest at all? No? Okay, thank you. That's really appreciated. I've got no chairperson's announcement and I've been given no AOP beforehand. So unless anybody is going to raise anything specifically. No? Okay, great stuff. So we'll move on then to the minutes of the last meeting. Now, I didn't attend, so I'm going to rely on others if I can do it page by page, if there are any issues or any omissions at all. Certainly today, Mia, I'll hopefully try to help. If there's an action coming out of today, I will make sure that I flag it to you. If I don't, somebody's got to put a pencil in me and prod me to make sure that I say, because I know how difficult it can be picking out actions as we go along. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so page 5 of the bundle, first of all, anything on that? Page 6, page 7, page 8, 9, and then 10. Everybody happy? Okay, and then the outstanding issues arising from the meeting. There's 2 at the moment, which is the first one, which is around management training. Lisa, I think I'm fair to say that that is booked in for next Thursday. All 4 commissioners are attending, and some of the ELT, SLT. So, yeah, so I think we can discharge that one.
Okay.
Yeah, if everybody then cancelled at the last minute, let me know and I'll kind of chase them up for you, Lisa. And then you'll have to help me with the next one, which is the terms of reference, which is the wording.
So Wayne's going to give you a verbal update, Chair, this morning, because he has done some final tweaks to the terms of reference, which I think were previously agreed by Lady Wilcox and Kirsty. So I've got a hard copy here. Apologies, I didn't print this in colour. So school girl error.
And I haven't got reading glasses, but between the 2 of us, we're doing really well, aren't we? So if I just kind of drift it out there and just pretend that I'm looking very studious, that should be all right, doesn't it? Okay, Wayne.
Yeah, of course. This is just to finalise the terms of reference. So in the original meeting in April, we brought a set of terms of reference which were approved subject to amending one of the bullet points in there. So they had the word target in there,
right?
And there was a discussion around that in terms of being a bit too narrow in terms of continuous improvement, and rather than aiming for specific targets, always looking to strive for continuous improvement and looking for a ceiling, really, of not putting a ceiling into how well we can do things. So after the meeting, a wording was sent to commissioners, which I've highlighted in yellow, which was approved. However, the word target did appear in another element of the terms of reference, which wasn't picked up. So I made some very, very slight amendments to what was originally then agreed the second time, to remove all references to the word target. So, like I said, the whole terms of reference was approved by section 4.6. Everything in yellow has been seen by the previous, the regular chairs and approved. However, it was not whether the word has turned up again. So I just made some very slight amendments to that, but it should be okay. It should be okay.
Okay, so effectively we're kind of moving to more outcomes and metrics, and that's Lisa dropping off the line, which is a little bit of a worry. I am comfortable with that. Is everybody else around the room?
Yeah.
And that ambition piece does feel right, isn't it? Targets can get very granular, can't they, and have some negative outcomes, whereas outcomes can be much more positive and empowering, in my view.
100%. Yeah, and that was really the rationale for reviewing them. Like I said, I've undertaken that one final one to make sure there's a reference to it. We didn't have one specific line on the day, so they should be okay to be approved.
So I think for the minutes, Mia, if you could just say that amendments were presented, paragraph 4.6, in terms of reference, and the highlighted sections in blue, 4.6.1.2 and 4.6.1.3 were approved at this meeting today.
And that discharges both actions then?
Yes. 100%. And I can confirm afterwards if I said that too quick.
Is that right, man? I'll have to get some software. Okay, thank you. So moving on then to, right, now this is going to get, Lisa, are you hearing us now? Right.
Yes, sorry, yes, I can hear you.
Diane, that's so great. So because we were going to have a little bit of tap dancing around who was presenting the report, on which we're all starting to stare at Sarah.
Yes.
We're starting to look at trial and twitching. So moving on then. So the first report I've got is from page 13, which is the revenue monitoring report.
Yes, are you okay, Sarah, for me to continue?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay then, so revenue monitoring report, this is the first report for the year, which provides an update to officers and members on spend to date and what the projections look like for spending up to the 31st of March 2026. More importantly, so it gives us a state of the budget. It provides an impact on the reserves, the usable reserves that sit on our balance sheet. It talks to what we receive and what the position is with audit, with grants also. So I won't go through the report in detail. I trust everybody has read this. Just to recap, this is in relation to the financial year 2025-26. So that's all financial transactions and forecast information from the 1st of April 2025 to the 31st of March 2026. And this report presents 3 appendices. The first appendix provides the state of the budget, and you can see what the budget was at the start of the year, what the spend to date is, what the projections are, and it also gives an analysis of the variances. So the variances there will indicate whether we are over or under on that initial budget that was set 13th of February. It gives an overall position, and you can see that there's a £3.2 million overspend projected for this year, over and above the budget. So the second appendix there provides the impact of this on the reserves, and these are the usable reserves that are highlighted in appendix 2. So they give the general reserve position and what that £3.2 million overspend is doing to the various earmarked reserves. And it's quite usual to be deploying reserves in a year to supplement initiatives that are not funded through the fire levy, which is the main piece of the revenue budget. The final appendix is the grant monitoring report, and you can see there it gives the grant income level, and it also gives the current forecast per the service manager's feedback we've collected, and you can see there's a number of unders and overs there because not all grants will cover all work streams, and that is agreed up front as well in many of those cases. So when I look at the budget, I tend to look at, I check it up into what's employee related and what's not employee related. So that £3.2 million overspend can be presented as 800,000 overspend on employee budgets. So that will cover salaries, pensions and on costs. And then 2.4 million of that 3.2 relates to non-salary area. And there's a number of headings that add up to that. In paragraph 2.2 there, or 2.21, I can see there's a table there that tries to give you some rich information about how we've come to that £800,000 overspend. And there's a number of staff categories that contribute to this. You've got full-time contracts, so that's full-time duty system, that's what WDS is. On-call duty system, that's our on-call contingent. Industrial action planning, internally referred to as our auxiliary firefighters, and part of our contingencies arrangements. Fire control, which is situated down in police headquarters. Non-uniform, otherwise known as corporate members of staff, and members or commissioners. So that would have been our fire authority, the cost of the fire authority. So what that table is giving you is a position in terms of what the head count is at a point in time. So I think everybody will appreciate that those figures do go up and down every day, every week, but they are collected at the end of June. So that's the position at the end of June. And it's trying to give you a view of what is the headcount doing in relation to those projected under and overspends. And you know, make it clear to some people that if you're below headcount, that's what's giving you the underspend. If you're above headcount consistently, that's what's going to give you the overspend. And that is demonstrated in the last column there under full year, in the red and the green figures there. So you can see, if I draw your attention to the most significant areas there, we'd overspent on hold time, we'd underspent on call, and there'll be various reasons for that. And we've tried to detail the breakdown of that whole time overspend underneath. You can see the majority of that is with stations. There's a small piece there in terms of principal officers, change and transformation. On call, I think anybody that's been in the thematic review discussions and operational sphere, they appreciate that the on-call system, we're having various discussions on how we make that work better for us in the future. And there's a narrative there then on the smaller areas of industrial planning and non-uniform. I won't go into detail unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll open up for questions or thoughts first of all. I've got a couple of pieces that we discussed earlier just to kind of bring through. Anybody in the room? I suppose one kind of, there's one, I suppose, for the future just to think about. Obviously, we've got Welsh Government looking at governance arrangements within fire at the moment. Now, at the moment, we've only got a budget of 6.5k for that. One of those things we're going to have to keep an eye aware of, aren't we, is even post-commissioner's intervention, if the government's arrangements change fundamentally in it, for example, they bring in a third of NEDs, that cost go up significantly, and that's something we're just going to have to think about for the future. I think it's really helpful, Lisa, because I think the identification of if we recruit to full-time posts, there is an impact on the budget. And sometimes it's easy to make those decisions, isn't it? Because it's the right thing to do to grow. But there is a consequence to that. I suppose the two areas that I know we discussed briefly, Lisa, is the overtime issue, which is more controlled and uncontrolled, and then the fire link element around that one, which, you know, baffled me, but was helpful because that's a big chunk of that money, isn't it, of the overspend projection at the moment.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the biggest issues of this report, one of the biggest cost areas is the cost of fire link, and commissioners and officers also will be aware, because we've signposted this in last year's outturn budget monitoring information, because this has been a growing issue since the last quarter of 2023-24. So it's hit us in all 3 financial years, and this is subject to that court case, and it's adding up to 1.8 million potentially paying this year if the court case isn't found in the favour of national emergency services. So it's not a court case for us, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, as an organisation. This is a national issue with Motorola, in terms of that very, very tight market. So we know that we've been through 2 court iterations and they have not found in favour of Motorola. There's a third to go through, and if they find in favour of them, we could be paying all those additional costs that we've managed to place in our reserve at the end of the year. So that out of that 1.8 million increase, which is very worrying when you look at it in paragraph 2.22, 1.1 is actually set aside in reserves for that. And really, essentially, what those charges are what have been referred to as unusual or abnormally high profits being made by Motorola, and that's the thing that they are trying to fight against. So yeah, 1.8 worrying, offset by that energy decrease of 400,000, but 1.1 of that is already set aside in our reserve position. And I think in terms of overtime, that's a bigger piece, and I hope to provide more information on that coming forward, because that overtime piece covers other allowances which are planned throughout the year, and also controllable and uncontrollable overtime. So when I say controllable overtime, that's things like overtime that we do see paid out for events like bank holidays. It's unavoidable. It's just what takes place in the service. And we know that we've got an initiative at the moment in terms of a trial with dealing with the flexible rostering regime and all the other bits that go with that, where we are trialing, we are using overtime to be able to support some change in that area. So we have seen some increased costs here. We go into the finance team to do further analysis, and we're going to work with the operational team to be able to provide and mitigate that overspend. That's what I'd like to do, Carl.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Dean?
Yeah, thanks, Carl, and thanks, Lisa. I think Lisa's articulated quite well, because I think with when we look at particularly salaries where there's an overspend with the whole time duty system, and then the provision and underspend with the on-call, but then even more around the overtime, because the overtime budget is capturing those 8 bank holidays per year, which we forecast, we plan, we know how much it's going to cost us. However, there's a fluctuation in terms of the incident and a escalation of protracted incidents that we attend, and obviously that's weather dependent. We've had a lot at the start of this year as well in terms of flooding, wildfires, and that increases our overtime budget that we don't plan for, but they can't cost captured then obviously in this forum here. So something that we try to capture and we plan as best as we possibly can, but is incident related. The underspend with the on-call is a slightly different picture. I think Welsh Government are picking up on this now as an issue within Wales, and there's a working group that's being established with Welsh Government interested in around the on-call terms, conditions, recruitment, attraction and retention issues, and then the whole time elements. We take a few steps in terms of the whole time recruitment, because right now we would probably be historically in a whole time recruitment campaign. We've paused the whole time recruitment campaign just so we can establish that workforce progression, what does it look like, the forecasting, so that at least it'll give us a better picture of what the future looks like for the service. So there's a few steps to be taken, but there's still a bit of work to be done as well.
Yeah, and my personal view is overtime is absolutely there for the unseen, isn't it? That's what we use it for, and it should be right used for. It's the seen stuff that we should be trying to manage best we can. So, Lisa, I think you said there that you're going to do some more work around overtime more broadly and understanding that. And I suppose as we've added an additional layer now, Dean, with the work around the paid shifts,
Additional shift
pilot, as that starts, reports to this group around progress and understanding of costs, I think, feels like the right way to go. That escalates the board because it's just that pilot run through. So there's probably two action days. It's the broader work around overtime to understand what that's going to be, and then the work around the pilot and the costings coming through this group. Are we comfortable with those? Yeah. Lisa, is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think the general piece is already in traction.
Fabulous. And if I never have to talk about ESN or Firelink again, then it will be too soon. But as we were talking earlier, as it's been for the last 10 years, I don't see it coming to an end very quickly.
No, quite right. I agree.
Fabulous. Great stuff. Thank you for that one. So moving on to the capital monitor report.
Yes. So this report, again, for the same period, the same financial year, this is a much smaller piece because this is not supported by fire levies, and South Wales Fire and Rescue Service doesn't get a share of the capital settlements that local authorities enjoy from Welsh Government. So our capital investment is funded from contributions from our revenue budget. There's about £200,000 financing contribution, otherwise known as CERA, capital expenditure from revenue account. That is budgeted annually. Some of it is grants. You can see there's £1.2 million worth of grants in there. Capital receipts, we generally get that from disposal of fleet, but we can get that from anywhere. If we were going to sell land or buildings or anything like that, capital receipts are earmarked for capital investment only. But the biggest piece you will see in terms of how we finance our capital investment is borrowing, and of course that does attract financing costs, such as statutory and repayment costs, otherwise known as MRP, interest, obviously, for borrowing, and all that links the capital with the revenue budget inextricably. So the affordability of our capital investment it is determined by what we can afford to sustain in terms of capital financing in the revenue budget. And the revenue budget points to a £5 million capital budget. So you can have a £50 million capital budget, but can you sustain the capital charges in your revenue budget? That's the key question here, isn't it? And this is all part of the prudential SIPFA code, you know, in terms of how you budget and what limits you put on for capital investment. So for us, we've got a £15 million budget for the year. That includes in-year allocation and slippage from last year. That's a key difference between revenue and budget, is there's this legacy issue with capital. You know, these schemes are bigger, they've got longer time horizons, and some are just don't complete in a year. So you've got this concept of slippage that you haven't got in revenue, and slippage is slipping forward funding to complete initiatives that have been started in prior periods. And for us, that looks like property. You can pick off some big ones there in terms of new in, but also in terms of our fleet, because they've got quite long build times. The average is about 26 weeks, and if that and that all needs to happen according to the timetable, and if it doesn't, it's longer. So at the minute, we've got that £15 million budget. We're only projected to spend just over 50% of that. The spend is 8.2 million. And there are reasons for that. We are finding ourselves in an unusual circumstance in terms of transformation of the service. And that really calls on our main asset classes of property, fleet, ICT and frontline equipment. Property and fleet in particular will be affected by things like the CRMP, the Community Risk Management Plan. Until the outcomes of that are known in detail, some of the initiatives will be difficult to press ahead, because you need to know what your business requirements are before you actually resource it, and that's what this report is speaking to. So it gives in Appendix 1 an overview of the capital budget and everything that I've just described. The yellow column is the projection until the 31st of March, and then you've got two further columns there in terms of over and underspending and slippage into the next year, 2026-27. It tends to speak for itself. I think if I was looking at this as a layperson, things I would pick up on are, you know, you're spending much less than you've budgeted for. So I've just described the challenge in place that we are in terms of addressing that. The other area, I guess, is the overspend of 1.7 million, and that is being serviced through underspends in various other capital schemes, and also that 1.2 million pound grant provision that we've been provided with after budget setting by Welsh Government. So it's very much, we've made this financial assistance has been made. It's something good that we need to do, and it's a good opportunity for us, and we've progressed some of those things that we wouldn't have otherwise done. And then you've got that slippage figure going forward, which is quite big. And I think from my point of view, I would say with slippage of that size, 8.6 million, so that's more than 50% of the budget. In terms of 2026-27 budget setting, you need to think about the impact of that slippage on there. Do you need something that's really big because you've got a really big slippage figure? Yeah, so that's a consideration, I guess, for officers and commissioners. And I've talked quite a lot. You've got you've got Appendix 2 there that gives you the grants overview. So I've talked quite a lot. Hopefully I've addressed the main points, but I'm happy to take any questions on that report.
Thanks, Lisa. That was really helpful. So questions, first of all, or points. Firstly, really helpful around the grant funded piece, Lisa, because it did frazzle my little brain. around the overspend, stroke the grant funded, and the fact that it came in year. So that was really, really helpful. And actually, it's a real positive, isn't it? That
Yes.
we're supporting the national infrastructure element here by purchasing those vehicles. So I think actually that's a really good news story.
Yes.
I suppose it's the 8.6 underspend, and then the date for the CRMPD and the consequences of all that starting to roll up, isn't it? I remember having a conversation with you last year, Lisa, that this year, because we had so much on, we had to be careful around what we wanted to do. Yet we've almost paused again, and we're rolling a bigger ball down the road, aren't we? And I suppose it's that, what can we do to kind of deal with some of that around slippage with the CRMP challenges coming through, and do we need to make some bigger, broader decisions going into the capital programme for next year, really?
Is that for me? Sorry, or Dean?
That was just my general kind of brain dump, really. So I kind of, I'll let you have a ponder, Lisa, and look at Dean, really, because obviously some of this is operational in nature, isn't it, as well as, service delivery.
No, I'd agree. I think there's so many different projects going on at the moment, particularly the control and the slippage there, and etc. Just trying to get a grip on everything that's going on and around the control, and in terms of, because some of this relates not just to our own activity, but we've got other partners involved in these activities that control some of the timelines and the deadlines of space. And that's why we see a lot of slippage, particularly with some of the operational elements. And that's a frustration for us, but it's something that we're working on closely with some of our partners as well. So there's still a bit of work to be done there.
And Lisa, any thoughts? Because, one option would be, isn't there, that we need to be thinking of a different way of approaching this into next year. We're going to still have some of the delays built in. Your team's only got so much capacity, certainly around the property element, hasn't it, to deliver so much. Does it need a sit down to think about what are we going to do with the capital budget, and where is our priorities going to be in a broader context at all?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Carl, because in terms of setting a budget for next year, we've revisited all the main medium-term asset plans, so that they are in, there's a 10-year plan for fleet, there's a 7-year plan for property, and there's some 5-year plans then for ICT and frontline equipment. And of course, CRMP impacts all of them to a lesser or greater degree. And I think it's really difficult to know what the level of the impact is likely to be. So I think in terms of slippage, for me going forward, that 8.644 there, it may not be used in those precise schemes in 2026. That's fine. We carry the figure forward, and in the year we repurpose. Because it's a dynamic use of that slippage, isn't it? The bigger challenge is in budget setting, isn't it? That's the biggest challenge. But if I look at the trends of spending in any one year in terms of capital investment, we don't tend to peak above £10 million. Now that could be quite a complacent view, really, okay? Because even if you buy the same things year on year, they're going to cost you more, innit? Because indexation being what it is, that's the effect that it has. But I would say to probably a tune of at least 60 to 70% of our needs next year, it's already in that slippage figure, isn't it? Because what you find with the capital budget, the nature of it is very different to the revenue budget in terms of we've got lots of recurring items in revenue, haven't we? But with the capital schemes, they're very different, and they new for each year.
I suppose it's, and I might be kind of well off key. So if I look at finance and HR system replacement, probably £2.5 million unbudgeted at the moment, isn't it? We've got going an ICT budget of 400,000. I suppose you've got to do the work to get to the right place, but we've possibly got to be thinking of, is that going to be an in-year cost next year, and do we want to repurpose around that one? But I'm not sure if we're having those conversations more broadly, and I use that as an example. It's probably not the best one, but some of those bigger elements, isn't it, of do we need to sit down over the next period with finance colleagues and the wider ELT, say, but what are some of these potential big spends going to be, and what's the prioritisation around it? I don't know.
But
I'm looking at you, Sarah, for inspiration.
my concern is that we need the ICT strategy in its fullness
Yeah.
for us to say we need to link all these ideas together. Because my concern is we may well feel that, you know, for example, we need a new HR system, we need it now, but actually we perhaps need to look out at what does it need to integrate to, and that's why I feel the ICT strategy is quite fundamental in us being able to budget for it. So we need that in place, don't we? So that we can say, yes, we need to budget for it in 26, 27, 27, 28.
Yeah.
So that's the missing link for me at the moment, which we're in the midst of dealing with, because it has specialists in looking at our strategies, that sort of thing. So that's why I'm with the budgeting. I would love to budget for these systems. We know they need to go in place, but it's difficult to roll out with a tender when we don't know what it needs to be linked to at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and you don't want to kind of do a shopping list and buy the wrong thing. do you?
Yes, and that's my concern. So it's we're in this limbo land, I suppose, at the moment, waiting for the ICT strategy to be generated in a way that looks forward on what we need.
So we're in it's a positive position in some way for the capital budget, isn't it? In that we're you know, we have some opportunities if we use them correctly. I suppose the question is, isn't it, do we start to need to thinking and getting that kind of general consensus view around what that could be going forward to support Lisa when we go to budget setting more broadly? And Lisa, I'm kind of looking to you really. Is there something that we need to kind of pull together that helps you around that budget setting piece, knowing the challenges we've got with CRMP, the lack of an IT strategy, etc., etc. Otherwise, we could be sit here again next year, couldn't we? Or we're rolling on again, and that feels like a bit of a wasted opportunity, really.
I don't think we've got time to wait for next year, because budget setting for 26, 27 and with capital, because so you know, under the combination order, we've only got requirements to set the net revenue budget for and that affects more revenue, doesn't it? But actually you need to set your capital budget in line with that, because unless you know what your capital activities are likely to be, you don't know what the capital financing budget is in your revenue budget. So you've got to do the two things together, even though there's no legislative requirement with capital funding. And I think Sarah's hit the nail on the head. You know, it's the ICT bit that's in question, and also, you know, I wouldn't want to grow that budget bigger than it feels like as if the level of about 15 million is about right. We've got about 8.6 million of that in slippage already in hand for next year, but it's the plans for how we're going to spend that, isn't it? You know, and that needs to happen before Christmas, isn't it? So I think there's this whole planning piece that needs to be started up and kept alive.
When is the review of that?
Flight cover review element of it will be around the end of October, early November.
Sorry.
But I think the CRMP in its entirety, I think that's a little bit later on.
Yeah, it is next year.
Yeah.
So, right, I need to kind of craft an action here that hopefully is helpful, not unhelpful. It feels like, isn't it, that the opportunity stroke threats around the capital budget needs to kind of go through to ELT with a view to a planning session to kind of look at what that could look like going forward. But it can't be the old travelator wish list of I'll have a teas made, I'll have a, it's got to be more sophisticated than that, built on good groundings, really. So if we looked at pushing an action for ELT, Sarah, that is an awareness of the current capital challenges and opportunities, with a view to doing then some work around what could be the additionalities, so opportunities that we want to look for. But I think you're right, it has to be built on solid ground. I think a wish list of 40 things is unhelpful.
Yeah.
Bit woolly that, we might have to tie it down. But is that helpful rather than being unhelpful?
Yes, I do think there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that need to be, you know, strengthened, pulled in, so that we can move forward
Yeah.
with elements that we find as a priority 1 and 2, as far as I'm concerned, when we talk about some of these digitalisation, which we have perhaps not as far as what we should be
Yeah.
in some areas. So
And that feels the obvious place
yes,
to invest, if we're investing in the right things.
yeah, we've got the right corporate plan on that.
It could also be almost a standing agenda item on ELT between now and Christmas, upon the basis that more information is going to start flowing in, isn't it? Following the IT review and also the fire cover review. So it might be that the first meeting of the ELT is to discuss the problem and the impact of revenue budget, but in the following meetings, up to Christmas, as more information arrives, you can start to prioritise and get that plan a bit clearer about the slippage and
Yeah.
what's going to happen next.
Is that okay, Lisa? Will that help?
That sounds fantastic.
Dee, happy with that?
Yes.
Okay, don't let me in the room because I'll try to buy a load of shiny stuff, which is why they never used to let me with their budgets at all, for obvious reasons. Although everybody having a gun and a body cam. Right, okay. Thanks, Lisa. Really, really helpful. Okay, moving on then, really exciting then, medium-term financial strategy.
Right, well, thank you, Chair. Delighted to present the medium-term financial strategy. It's a 3-year plan. We have both a report and appendix 1, which I wasn't going to go through in detail, to be honest. I'm hopeful that you've read the majority of it. So the purpose of this medium-term financial plan at this moment in time, the strategy, is setting the scene of the environment, both internally and externally, and how we can write our budgets for the next 3 years. What we're looking for a decision today is with regard to that you accept it, but on the basis of the assumptions and risks that are within this plan. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about that. So the purpose of this report is to set the framework for the financial planning and the assumptions for the 26-27 annual budget. What I do want to highlight are the external risks we currently have in the environment, and these are things such as the current inflation rate. So there's an assumption, and it's not definite, there's an assumption that we are going to get to Bank of England's target of 2% inflation, and there's currently an assumption that perhaps local authorities are going to have an increase in the budget of that 2%, which puts us in a difficult position because inflation is currently 3.8%. So when we're budgeting, it's the risk we have now that we look at the 3.8, could it go up, could it go down? So there are risks involved when we take external factors into account. We've also got the risk of interest rates. For a while, we thought interest rates were going to come down. They haven't. They're still at 4%. So that affects when we're looking at capital financing, what sort of rates, when we're going to expire with some of our loans, how we're going to finance those, and the risks involved in guesstimating some of the activity there. And we know the local authorities are under pressure with regards to their own budget. So these are some of the external factors that are within this report that we need to consider. From my perspective internally, we need to also, our biggest costs, our staffing costs, is 77% of our budget. So here we have to guesstimate what the agreement of uplift will be in the salaries in the next year. So for example, last year we assumed 3%, 3.2% that was agreed. So again, there's risks involved in our assumptions here, isn't there? I mean, the feeling is that a local government is going to have more budget pressure put on them. We know the central government has got a black hole in their finances, so we have to guesstimate where we think that might be. And a lot of the information, and from speaking to the treasurers, that is around 3%, but we don't know that. We're just guessing. So we've got to write budgets based on environmental factors at that moment in time, and we are 6 months away from the start of a new financial year, and things can change in those 6 months. The financial strategy looks at the environment for 3 years. The other impacts we have on this strategy are our CRMP and our ICT strategies. That could hugely impact. We've just talked about how that affects our capital. So that would affect our capital charges. That's what gets pulled into our revenue budget then, how we finance these types of initiatives and programmes. So the medium-term financial strategy looks at all these different types of things. If there's anything else that I need to raise your attention to, I have tried within the appendix a bit of a sensitivity analysis. If we go to page gap analysis on page 56, for example. So what I'm trying to do here is say, what if for the next 3 years we increased, we requested a 2% increase from our authorities? What if it was a 3% actual impact or a 4% actual impact? And if you can see there, the blue line is the 2%, and with an orange and the green. So we've got quite a big gap there. So although we are very sensitive to our local authorities and what sort of grants and financial pressures they're under, we still have to be mindful of our own cost pressures and what we're going to be asking for. So that was trying to show you, if we don't ask for the right amount of levies, the impact on us and our reserves. Our reserves are currently 17 million, the majority of which are usable reserves. That is true. So we have what I class as reasonably healthy reserves, but we are under a lot of change at the moment with the transformational programme, the CRMP, ICT. So we have a lot of moving factors over the next 3 years that are going to impact us financially. We're talking here also about, there's a bit on here, I suppose, about efficiencies, but very broadly in here with regards to our partnership and arrangements and those sort of ideas. We also talk in here is if we have a change in our major costs, which are payroll, how would we combat that? And I've tried to say in here, well, we have to look for internal savings there. I'm going to stop there. Would anyone like to ask me any questions or insights?
Questions? Before I start jabbering again. So I think it's really helpful. I think, absolutely the right thing to. First question really, sorry, is how do we use it now with ELT, SLT? Have you thought about how that will kind of go into that environment, kind of raise people's profiles? That's query. What are you thinking about that one? I've got the first chair of commissioners meeting nationally coming up next month, I think. I know pays on that one. If I hear anything, I'll take that back. And I suppose one of the other elements that we always forget about around the Welsh governance review is they are looking at funding as well. So, and that would be a massive shift for fire if it went under central government funding, which is one of the proposals over the levy. So you're right to raise all of those issues, so the uncertainty of the future around funding. Now, I genuinely don't know sat here what's going to come out of that review around the funding element, but potentially it's the most risky for the service, basically around inspection and governance really around. So just what's your thoughts about how?
So I'll pick up on the risk element because that's my concern at the moment, and it is going to be feeding into the risk register. We're going to be having monthly meetings, and I really think that's quite an important one. And as part of the service, we need to consider how we're going to deal with this. And sensitivity analysis is going to be very important for us to start thinking about these things, along with looking at how we cost things, our income streams, are there any other alternatives, looking at our activities, potentially being able to say what activities could we freeze should there be a change in our financing or how we get funded. So all those are a bigger project that they definitely need to be looked at. With regards to raising the profile of the medium-term financial strategy, there's lots of things that are going on in the background that I've spoken to Lisa and Amanda about yesterday with regards to financial literacy and making sure that from all the way through from bottom to the top, so not just SLT, that vein of money and being aware of value for money and our communities and the importance of how we spend and the decisions we make. With regards to the strategy, at this moment in time, this seems more like a scene setter. It really needs to be updated, doesn't it, as we go through and we move through the year, and next year then we will hopefully have more information and more things feeding into it. But definitely getting the financial literacy and upping the knowledge of the organisation about the importance of finance is going to be hugely important, yes. So I think we talked about yesterday with regards to whether this should be more of a standing agenda item on SLT, ELT. I think that is a good way forward, and we have discussed that.
I don't know about you, Dean. I think it's absolutely the right thing, isn't it? I suppose brain dump again, which is always a dangerous thing with me, isn't it? I really worry about the uncertainty around the financial position going forward. And this might be very different, but my previous places, it's almost we'll wait until it hits us before we'll do anything about it, or have the plans in place, or have the efficiency and effectiveness programs in place. That to know that we can turn up service levels up or down, we can make decisions around actually, are we going to let people go? I've not seen that we've got anything like that here either at the moment, and we might have, and I might not have seen it, but if we just go to Wayne saying, Wayne, what can you say about your team? Wayne's response is probably going to be, we're really busy.
Yeah.
If we go to Manley, it's probably going to be the same. If we go to me, it'll be the same, because people are looking at it through the lens that they see. It feels like, with the uncertainty that we've got around funding going forward and the lack of clarity, that we need to put in place an efficiency and effectiveness programme that's sat at the top that looks at the whole organisation. And I think we need to kind of look at what that could look like. So am I in the right place? And if I am, do we need to kind of scope out what that could look like? Because you can do it in lots of different ways, can't you? You can bring in consultants, you can do it yourself, you can do zero-based budgeting, you can do lots of things you can do. But we've got to agree on an approach that we're comfortable that sits to the organisation, but actually has some accountability, probably at the top of the organisation that goes down, rather than bottom of the organisation saying, oh, we're really busy. Because you only know what you know.
I totally agree with you. I think we're not in a position at the moment that should a change in funding happen, that we'd be able to say, that's okay, we can do this differently, we can do that differently. I think it needs to be a review of perhaps all elements of the service, isn't it? That's what, and I think it's quite common in England to have a productivity and efficiency strategy. That's what they have, isn't it? It's not something that we do here. We're funded completely differently, but potentially as evidence of value for money, this is something that we need to look into, I think, moving forward. And it would have to come from the top. I do think that it would have to be led, but each area would need that support. As you're quite right, whether we bring in externals, whether we do it ourselves, or whether we do a hybrid model, that needs to be looked into, I think.
Yeah, Dean's thinking, thank God I'm retiring. I suppose the question is, this it's not probably, because I think we need to commission potentially the work to understand what it could look like and what it should be.
Yeah.
Do we think we should be doing it? I suppose is the question.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think also from my perspective, I think some of Sarah's sort of points around, we should be looking internally at being more efficient. So I'm used to lean in processes, looking at systems thinking, are we doing that as a matter of course? I think the answer is probably no. So that there's a big piece of work to do, I think.
Dave?
Yeah, I think we've started the discussions, I guess, at the LT and around some of the issues you just raised there now, Chair. So I think that's Chief's ambition as well, because we talked about it earlier this week. And what does efficiency look like for the service departments, et cetera. So there's a piece of work that needs to happen. We're probably in those early stages, I would suggest.
Okay, so I think I then, because I don't normally chair this, can give an action then that says that we need to produce a paper that defines what this services approach is going to be around efficiency and effectiveness going forward. And I think that's broad enough then, isn't it, that we can do the exploratory work to understand it, but with a view to that approach starting probably into the new year. Now, there's been a lot going on over the last 2 years, hasn't there? So it's probably one of those things we've brought you back a little bit, but there's a lot coming up. And it's really difficult, going to be difficult to go to local authorities saying, we're cutting social services, but can we have extra?
Yeah.
That's not a great place to be in, is it really? So I think if we're going to do the exciting stuff we want to do, we're going to have to kind of say some of this ourselves, aren't we? Get some of this stuff. Is that action specific enough then, but broad enough? Or do we need to tighten it up a little bit, or can we tighten it up after the meeting? Because I think we know what we're trying to achieve.
I think,
We
yeah.
could probably take it offline. I think for me, it's a paper about what the terms of reference would be for that efficiencies and savings piece of work. because I think it's organisation wide.
Yes.
And I think that paper's not going to give the solution.
No.
It's
Yeah.
literally going to say, these are the ways we could, either by employing, supporting to come and do it. I'm just conscious that everybody's really, really busy and someone's got to write that report. But I think if we can focus on developing the terms of reference,
Yes.
and whether we do a hybrid approach or bring in external agency to help us with it, I don't know, but that could be the subject of.
Is that okay? You happy with that? Lisa, is that okay with you?
That sounds on the button to me.
Happy with that? Okay, so if I got, abdicating responsibility, if you don't mind, kind of just tweaking it, making sure it does what it does.
We can work.
But we've got to move, haven't we, to conceptual to doing, because it takes time, this sort of stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's bullet usually.
No.
Then you're doing, right,
Before we move on, can I just check you're happy to approve the strategy?
I am happy to, I think it's really good, thanks. As you say, it is kind of review, isn't it? And that's absolutely right, Sarah, isn't it? But it's good to have one.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Right, moving on to the internal audit report then.
Yeah.
So,
So we've got 3 reports here for consideration. You've got IT, anti-fraud, and the third one, sorry, trying to get to the page in question. Governance. So we've got, can I see Steen there? I can just about see Steen Golay, the internal auditor, who'll go through reporting in greater detail. Over to you, Steen.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, for each of the reports in turn, so I've got governance, ICT digital, and then the anti-fraud. If I briefly highlight some of the findings and then take the questions as we go through. The first one, as I say, is governance. So the findings were, so there's a new constitution governance framework in place that has been developed at the time of the audit field work with the silver documentation around terms of reference, in particular for this audit committee, but also other groups such as the People Committee, Local Pensions Board, Executive Leadership Board, Senior Leadership Team. There's also findings of timeliness for preventing minutes for certain meetings. You'll see from the management comments that the report was undertaken, but it was taken in February. The management comments came back a little bit later, so it's a timing issue in terms of what's happened in terms of the actions, or lots of the recommendations have been addressed since that time. That's not very interesting.
okay, any questions or points on the governance paper, first of all?
Yeah.
Only, oh, sorry,
I'm just going to note there, I was probably the individual who was interviewed about this one, and Steve mentions it there in terms of when at the point in time of the field work, a very different place where we are now. So I think having had the constitution approved, the governance framework itself approved, we're then in a position to start moving with terms of reference and things like that. So for no since then, just for a bit of reassurance, we did present the governance framework document in February, which was approved. So that gives the green light to move into committees and formalising the terms of reference. The Strategic Change, Transformation and Culture Committee terms of reference were approved by commissioners in February. Finance and Audit Committee terms of reference obviously been finalised today, but they were presented in April. People Committee terms of reference were presented in June. And the annual governance statement went to Audit Wales and was presented to commissioners on the 31st of June 2025. So a lot of governance work in here has been progressed a lot since the interviews, but it's really good to have a touch base with TIA to see are we on the right track, are we on the right lines. I think the recommendations were really welcome. But in terms of regardless of the delays, I think we already knew what the plans were to implement a lot of recommendations. So yeah, it was a good interview, but yeah, it was quite a while ago when we sat and had a conversation. We were in that transitional period. But yeah, we moved forward with that now, and I think in terms of all the other actions, and obviously the monitoring officer started last month, another look at the governance in terms of the health check and see where we are. But yeah, in terms of where we were, it was like I said, it was very thorough audit. It was very well carried out as per usual. We have certainly made some of the recommendations were already on the horizon. We haven't quite.
The only thing I had then is that when I read it, and I might have read it wrong, and I do apologise, is that we seem to have kind of agreed SLT terms of reference, but not on ELT terms of reference. Or am I misreading that from the action that was in there? Because certainly kind of previously, the ELT and the SLT are different beasts around accountability and responsibility, but we seem to have kind of not got terms of reference for both, and that surprised me, but I might have read it wrong.
No, you read it correctly. And I think where it came from was we had a diagram of the governance framework itself, and then the governance framework diagram. We had a diagram, a picture of the ELT of the principal officers. But at the time, obviously, all the formal decision making meetings that we have are done as a senior leadership team, which does include the executive leadership team and the heads of service as a combination. So obviously, all those meetings themselves have terms of reference. The executive leadership team as a body doesn't. You've got the scheme of delegations, which outlines in terms of their individual decision-making delegated powers. But that is a gap in terms of what are these individuals, but not it is covered within the SLT terms of reference. So at the time, there was no real definitive ELT terms of reference devised. Primarily as terms of formal decision-making meetings tend to obviously heads of service as well for that collective scrutiny. So it was a gap we probably have had. Obviously, it's not been closed yet, but it was a gap at the time of the audit. It still hasn't been closed. I know we still have some elements of the executive leadership team that are still to be formalised in terms of the operating model and in terms of areas of responsibility. So I think they're being finalised at the end of September. So I think it'll be a good time to move out on some definitive terms of reference.
So if I can ask you then, Wayne, if working with the ELT then, to kind of define what that terms of reference is, because you might be right, you might capture it all. If it is, I'd question why we've got the SLT and the ELT. If it's one and the same, then it's one and the same. If it's not, then let's be really clear around what define. Because I think is for the new governance, right, come from post commissioners, I think that would be really clear around ELT roles, responsibilities, and accountability. And SLT terms of reference. I think it would be helpful. Sorry.
No, I was going to add to that. I was just going to say that obviously I'm intending to do quite a major piece of work to review the constitution in advance of the new governance model to get it more streamlined and brought up to date. That will include a relook at scheme delegation, and the scheme delegation is directly related to which decisions go where. So actually, yes, it's on my list that we do need ELT. In my view, if you have a body, they have to reference. Otherwise, as you say, what's the point of having them if it's not defined what their role is? So you should have terms of reference for ELT and SLT. I understand there's an overlap, and I think there may be an overlap for historic reasons, because you probably will move to a place where SLT are empowered to make decisions about ELT being there, and that's why you keep you escalate things as needed. So I think it could be all mopped up as part of the governance review. But short term, when I have a look at that,
Is that okay?
see if we can find a temporary fix. But yeah, see if that'd be
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. So next one I have got is ICT digital.
So we'll look back a bit of assurance around the new strategy. So a lot of strategy, yes. And we're going to first the action plan and also metrics in which the action plan and the strategy will be measured. So we'll substantial process mechanism around version control of the action itself. It's just to make sure that everybody's referring to the same document for discussions and decision making, and whether that's substantial for sure.
So this is the one that surprised me, if I'm really honest, bearing in mind the discussions that we just had around the strategy for ICT and digital going forward and some of the challenges we've got going on. I suppose you've looked at it through that rather than that, haven't you, because of the nature of the audit? Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. It's a specific assurance around delivery of that strategy at that particular time. I think it's not looking at the development of the new strategy going forward.
And we've also got the ongoing work with the external contract around digital going forward. I suppose that's a question, isn't it? Maybe Sarah, Lisa, around audit of, do we want you to look completely retrospectively, or do we want you to look at good practice and forward thinking as well? And I think this is a good example, maybe, for that discussion to be had around this, really. Yeah. Or is it?
No, I agree. Yeah. Sorry, did someone else? Lisa was going to sorry.
No, I agree. I think that probably some closer work with internal audit moving forward. It will support the work that Amanda is doing with her governance review, and I think it will improve understanding across the SLT ELT board as well. If information is shared more timely and more widely, and it just bolsters that organisational learning and all of us, doesn't it? You know, the sharing and the focus and the scopes of some of this stuff.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Elise. I think it was to do with the scoping.
Yeah.
Is what's your concern, isn't it? Because the picture here is that is what's in place. That's the scope. We've ticked that that's in place. But actually, we've got a wider plan for ICT that perhaps needs a lot more support, which is why we're going out to get support on that. So it's more of a real strategy to see, isn't it? So I think it's a scoping issue here.
Yeah, I think supporting more going forward
Yes.
and assessment around that. I think
Yeah.
it's a good opportunity, isn't it, really, to build that into it from the starting point.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
And
Just
Oh, sorry,
just
Lisa.
sorry, just for officers' awareness, so they may, I do share the annual plan with officers internally. We had a session this year before this financial year started with our internal auditor, Steen was there, and Jonathan. Lady Wilcox was involved in developing what that annual audit plan would look like, as well as Wayne. And I think that the resource of internal audit at this moment in time buys us 70 days, you know, and we've got some targeted areas there to hit off. And I think that forward look, as opposed to retrospective, we can pick that up in subsequent internal audit plans, but it doesn't prevent us, if we were going to gain major traction on ICT strategy within the coming months, of getting that additional assurance in on top of that contract.
Yeah, no, that makes real sense, Lisa. Okay, so I think the action we're on that one specifically then, Mia, is that Lisa and the audit team work together with the heads of to kind of look at the scope and scale and the direction of the future audits.
Mhm.
Brilliant. Okay, and then the final one.
Final report is anti-fraud.
Yeah.
I think recommendations for this one, particularly timely around the new Economic Crime Corporate Transparency Act and organisations to prevent fraud element within that act. Also, documents you would expect to see in place but needed to be redrafted. So things like the fraud response plan, the anti-fraud and bribery plan, fraud risk assessments in place but need to be updated. Another key element which was earlier on is having that kind of conversation with staff as well in terms of fraud awareness. So that's another recommendation as part of the report. But yeah, things in place but needs to be reviewed and updated based on the new requirements.
Just more broadly then, so obviously the timelines for this, the act in place now, so we have a legal responsibility for it already, yet we've still not hit some of the deadlines for the delivery of some of the products on the back by reading this. Do we need to kind of support anybody to get that over the line?
So for me, because this, even though this hits a number of heads of service, some of the dates there, they've been missed. So the 1st of September dates that are for me specifically, I have missed those, and it's been a capacity issue for us, and we've had a number of other pressing areas. This is important, and we do need support for this going forward. So I'll pick this up in the coming weeks and come back to commissioners with an update at our next finance and audit, because this is a real challenge for the finance team at this moment in time. And of course, fraud specifically falls under me and affects the finance team to a greater degree than it does most other teams in terms of those working policies, those working procedures, that reporting piece, you know, and the recording of information. So I'm very conscious about those deadlines there, and that they've been missed.
So Lisa, you'll come back to the next finance audit with an update. I suppose if we all know fraction your team are under, I suppose if it's around policy, that is an area that we could potentially buy in support to do.
Yes.
If we need to, can't we?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, was compared to the new legislative
Yeah.
requirements, couldn't we? So
So-
is it more than one policy? I'm guessing it does affect more than one. Do you know how to review?
Yeah, there's a few there. You've got the anti-fraud and bribery policy, whistleblowing, and we've got the God, Steve, what's it called? The fraud activation plan.
Risk assessment.
Yeah.
And, the fraud response plan.
Yeah, those. So you know they were reviewed last probably 2 to 3 years ago. So two were formal policies. One is a procedure. So yeah, it would be great to get that piece of work done.
Yeah, I can work with Lisa on these because we've got our legal
team.
team looking at our HR procedures, so we can bring these into the mix as well.
That's a great offer, Lisa. If we
Thank
can
you.
do that one and then an update for the next week, that feels like a good way of supporting the team and hopefully take away some of the pressure because these are really important. You know, I don't know if anybody saw the in America the other day, the ex-admiral that's just got sent down for 16 years for fraud and bribery, but for not following policies. So yeah, it's absolutely, it is key. Thank you. Is that all right, Lisa?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much.
Dean, is that okay? Yes. Anything else from audit from you?
Just a progress report.
Yeah, thank you.
Back. So that's the only visual updates terms of where we are with things we work. I think because of when we produce this and when the papers come to this committee, we've got a little bit out of sync with what we told you that we've done since the last time it was presented here. Actually a conversation with the members just now before the meeting. We're going to meet and kind of talk through the process and some kind of streamlining.
Yeah, I think it was the lag I noticed. It's taken a while for reports to get to the committee. And I think, yeah, we're just going to have a chat about how that works.
That window. Yeah.
And whether my arrival can help with that and take a bit of pressure off Lisa, for example, not trying to make stuff known, I suppose. If I can help align the dates in the forward work plan to all the deadlines which we need to hit and internal audit reporting. Just to make sure that we get it in here a bit more timely, and then you won't have to have Wayne saying everything's changed since the last report, you know, because it feels like there's a 6-month lag there. So.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be really helpful, and the closer we can get that report done in here, it's got to be the best thing, isn't it? Brilliant. No, that sounds like a cunning plan. Okay, thank you, Steve. That's really helpful. Right, I am now moving on to, I think, Treasury Management Review.
Yes, I'll keep this nice and short. This is quite a technical paper, an area of work for the finance team and the service. This is the second of 3 statutory reports that come to board. The first report is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement. That comes to board before the financial year starts, and it did in March. This is a second one, so this is an update. So this provides a position audit of where we are in terms of that strategy that's set for the year, and then at the end of the year we'll be reporting an outturn or a review report to commissioners. Well, this is not the update, this is review. Sorry, this is a review. So it needs to come to committee before the 30th of September. This report, it speaks more of compliance in terms of the thresholds, the limits, and the policies that we put in place in the strategy. Did we breach them? So did we work within, did we breach any of them? So at this point, you'd expect this report to say if that was the case. This report is not saying that. We didn't breach any of the limits, any of the indicators or policies that we set out in the strategy for 2004-05, which is encouraging. And then the report seeks to provide you with some outturn information. When I say outturn information, it's year-end position, you know, in terms of what we did with our investments and the income that we had in, what we did in terms of our borrowing and how much that cost us. And that's captured in Appendix 1 there. And what the report also tends to do, as opposed to giving you this is how we finished off the year ending 31st of March, it gives you a brief economic update in terms of, you know, what the interest rate forecast is and that inflationary piece that SAR spoke of in a medium-term financial planning report. So this does dovetail quite significantly with the statement of accounts, which has been signed off by Audit Wales in July. So it's just a final piece to just box off financial year 2024-25 for us. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Sarah, anything for you at all?
No, I've been through it. I'm happy.
Any questions? No, I'm Lisa, really happy with that and lots of nodding around the table. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And moving on to the next one, we have a letter from Audit Wales. And I think this is just to note that we've received it and to recognise it and to, I presume, thank Audit Wales for their response. Or
Yes.
am I going to be different way, Lisa?
Yes, that's right.
Great stuff. Thank you. And then moving on then to the critical and strategic risk report.
Yeah, thank you. I'll present this report. So this is a report based on the Services Risk Management Framework that does come into this committee twice a year to talk about the risk register, the strategic risk register specifically. This report that I've written for this meeting, however, talks a lot about the changing approach the services taking to risk. So rather than just presenting the register as we would normally do, I'm going to give some information here about how we're looking at overhauling the way we look at risk, which has already been touched upon in this meeting. So ACFO Chris Hadfield has actually been leading this project and has done some really has done some research in this area. I've mentioned in the paper he's been obviously a different fire and rescue service in Sweden to look at how they do things. You'll notice that it's changed its name from the strategic risk report to the critical strategic risk report. There's a need to differentiate some of our critical risks to life and then some of the other risks that are strategic that impact the way we undertake the business but don't fall into that critical category. We've also, as a service as well, we've looked at employing consultants to come in and look at the way we do and manage risk. We've awarded that contract already. They've already had some initial meetings. They talk about in the paper about some of the meetings they'll have with us. They met with us as a key group of stakeholders. We involved operations, it involved my department, the planning, performance and risk teams. We looked at what we had now and they gave us an indication of how the project would go in terms of looking at the way we look, register, identify, document, score and manage risks. So a complete overhaul there. And they met with the senior leadership team the same day to go through and try and get a bit of buy-in in terms of what we would do to the risk register. And then on the 15th of May, they met with us this week in the afternoon to talk about what their plans were in terms of managing risk. So they've looked at the risk registers themselves. I don't think they're particularly keen on risk registers. I think they want to move more to a sophisticated way of looking at risks in terms of hazard, events and hazards, and looking then at full arm of how to mitigate them occurring and full arm of understanding what happens after they occur to minimize the outcome, which is the bow tie method. So they gave us a full afternoon on that earlier in the week. And I think it's been mentioned as well, we're looking at the way we manage risk as a senior leadership team as well. So they are discussed in meetings every 6 weeks. We've, however, decided to have a strategic risk and assurance forum, which is going to be a monthly meeting where we're going to delve a little bit deeper into risks and look at them a bit more critically. So that's some progress we've made. The team were in a meeting with the risk consultants yesterday. They had a conference and they've made some really good contacts there in terms of the way forward. So the risk consultants will look at the top to bottom review of risks right the way through to from critical risks right the way down to how we assess risk on fire grounds and how we assess risks all the way throughout the building. This is again a project driven by our chief fire officer who's come from a different background where they look at risk a lot more depth, a lot more sophistication. So, but I did provide the register anyway. I was asked by obviously ACFO Hadfield to mention that this is a work in progress. The critical risks have only just been pulled out. I think, like I said, the senior leadership team are very, very on board with the new way of doing it. I think, like I said, that meeting we had with the company last week, so earlier this week, and the one 2 weeks ago, gave us some real food for thought in terms of how we consider risks. And like I said, the chief has given us some examples of how using the more sophisticated method of looking at risks has been very useful in some really difficult situations in your previous life. So I think to protect those service, protect the members of staff we have and all the risk owners, this piece of work will be pivotal in terms of giving us that assurance that we're managing risk. However, the current risk register as a result, as the report I provided does look, and there's a few areas of improvement in that one, but I could probably assure the group that in the next meeting, what I'll be presenting will be very different. So this is almost a report to demonstrate that we are in transition, with a position of having a relatively static risk register, which is a lot more of a list, to something a lot more sophisticated, which I'll be probably bringing into this committee in January or February next year. But the risk register itself, we do have 34 risks as an organisation on the critical and strategic risk registers, the combination. 24 of them we do rate as high at the moment. So until we multiply the impact and likelihood, 5 of them are rated medium and 3 are rated low for now, and 2 of them have yet to be scored. So again, it's that deep dive analysis into some of these risks, I think, needs a real bit of work. I think as well, having spoken to the risk consultants, they refer to common concerns they see when they first come into organisations, which I think has been food for thought for us as well. And you mentioned earlier in terms of people looking at their own risks through their own lens and actually taking that step back and having a bit more of a data-driven approach to actually analysing risk, being able to score it on more of a strategic wider piece rather than looking at, risk to your area of your area of interest is obviously a huge strategic risk for yourself, but having that organisational appetite and having that organisational way of actually dynamically scoring something so you can actually have a service-wide picture. It's just a bow tie mechanism. It does look very complex, I'll be honest. I've seen some really complex bow ties on the board, but the company swears by them. And I think, like I said, our chief was a massive advocate of having to use them in quite difficult situations in the past. He refers to them as obviously being a very, very useful assurance to be able to drive a lot of the business as well in terms of where your scores are higher, being able to allocate resources into the right areas. So, like I said, this report, like I said, it is in transition. There are some scores that have not been entered. There are some risks there that I think in terms of score, when you take a step back, you think they probably need a good review in terms of that organisational appetite. I think there's some elements of individuals scoring them based on their own area of interest and area of the business. So I think there's a lot of work to be done here, but this is just a note for the commissioners that the register is still there. It is still worked on. It's just that we're in this transitional period of coming up with something different for me. But I'll stop there for questions. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. Questions around the table for more? So I've got a couple, Wayne, you probably all gathered I will have. So I think you said timeline for something different is January to February time.
I would hope so, yes. They're
I'm going to
undertaking.
pin you down on that one. January, February. Yeah, so no, I think it's that important because of all the papers that I read today, this was the one that I had the ooh moment on, really, when I looked at some of the risks and the ones that were scored really high and other ones in there, and actually the lack of update. So I think we need to move on. So that brings the second question for me, Wayne, really, of what do we do in the interim? Because January, February might not seem that long, but it's 4 or 5 months. And I'll use examples. So the first one, the highest level risk in this organisation moment is around diversity, equality and inclusion. Now, bear in mind my previous background, I've talked to people about this already. I was the head of diversity, equality and inclusion for policing. So it's my passion, my energy. But I struggle to see that as the greatest risk for our communities and firefighters in this organisation at this moment in time. Yet it's the highest one on here. And we haven't got an update on it.
No.
So it feels like whatever we're going to do January, February, naming you down, we need to do something about this in the meantime to make sure it is actually as fit for purpose as we possibly can. Because we should be working towards these risks, shouldn't we? We should be focusing on the highest level risks in this organisation, which means all our energy should be around diversity, equality, inclusion at the moment. Yet we're probably not, rightly or wrongly, yet we'll focus on other areas when you look at the risk, I'm much lower down. So personal view, and it is my personal view, and I'm really happy for the challenge. I think we need to do something about this, even in the meantime. But
No, I completely agree with you. I think the strategic risk and assurance program being monthly would be a huge leap forward. That's what we've noticed in the past. We discussed the register, we look at the register, we add and take things away. But what we tend to do is obviously it's a 30-minute agenda item. in a formal meeting that we have.
And it's normally at the end.
It's normally at the end, and you very rarely get that deep dive. So that you very rarely get that deep dive and across the whole group view on it. So, like I said, there in certain areas of the business, that will be the biggest risk. But as an organisation, like you said, there it's taking that holistic view. So, the new forum, I think, and certainly the chief fire officer picked this up. Because we were never really getting our teeth into the depth of the risk. It was a case of we have a register, it's there are owners, there are actions, etc., etc. So, in audit, it looks okay on the outside in terms of we have what we need to have as a register. But I think for us, in terms of a senior leadership team, you're right, having that time, setting it aside to say these things should be what drive what we do and what's important to us, and actually being able to sit there and say, we appreciate that these things may be important to some of us in the room. And then, like you said, they're passion areas. In terms of if these things aren't going the way they go, we have to put risks to life in this organisation as well. I think the bow tie would be a massive change as well, because DICE will be an area of something that can happen to drive an adverse event rather than being its own risk.
Yeah.
It is what has initially been identified. So you'll get to see how DICE will be a priority, and how it can, like I said, it can and may be a leading factor to adverse incidents and injury if we don't look at certain areas of it. So I'd imagine it would be a line that we have in more risks of what can go wrong rather than being a risk in itself, because it's something we have to look at. There's so many different complex areas to getting DICE right. It probably will reflect itself in bow ties. But again, that piece of work is still in its infancy. But no, you're completely right. And I think that monthly forum was definitely something we sat there and when we look at this, we're all aware of the register, but that being able to get your teeth into a register probably takes, by the time you've got into one risk and you're really getting into it. And the register has grown noticeably from 16.
There's a lot.
It's gone from 16 to 34 risks probably in the last six months based on emerging issues. So yeah, putting that time aside as I think it's an SLT to say, we really need to get a little bit deeper, and this can't be a 30-minute agenda item. This needs to be 120 minutes of debate, discussion, and really coming up with something at the other end. But as an interim measure, I probably can't provide a newer version of what we have now after the next SRAF review.
Yeah, well, that seems like the right approach.
But I could definitely provide an interim solution. We've got updates, maybe revisions of the scores once we've actually sat there and got into them in the next meeting.
Alison?
Yeah, Chair. Yeah, so just an observation and apologies, I think we've missed this. So DICE and the fourth item down on the list, there's a dependency between the two. So it's about having a more diverse workforce, as well as looking at DICE as a kind of embedded piece of work across the service. So I think we probably haven't updated the top one, thinking that the bottom one it is the most live one for us. So I think we need to have a deeper dive on this, as you suggest, Wayne. Sure.
100%. Like I said, it's definitely an item we need to do a bit more work on.
And I should know the answer to this one. Does it come to the board commissioners, the risk register?
No.
Then I think the question for when you do the governance review, Amanda, for an action of should it? Personally, I think it should. I don't know how often, but I think it should. Because I think it's coming to finance and audit, which is great. But this is the risk register for the organisation. So should it come to the most, I don't know, but it's, could you have a look at it?
Yes, I did look at that previously. We get some direction from our auditors as well, but I think good practice is it would always go to the Finance and Audit Committee.
Yeah.
Who are delegated that power, but you would escalate forward anything you're concerned about. So the commissioners or the full fire authority that it will be in future, it might be that you say, well, we'd like this particular item on the risk register to be considered at that sort of high level. So I think to regularly report risk into two places would be inefficient and not something which would add much. But I think you can decide at which point it
There
triggers
might be
going up higher.
escalations into
Yeah.
that one, yeah.
I don't know if our auditors have any view about that.
Unfortunately, there's no common way. I don't think.
No.
What you talk about is probably the most common way. So the risk register presented to the audit committee equivalent each meeting. Often is at least an annual presentation of the risk register to the board.
Yeah.
But other organisations they regular reports on high risk. So there's top 10, top 5, or if it's only ones that can get the residual high go to the board. Of course.
So definitely worth a look at.
Yeah, it's certainly something worth looking at as we develop a new governance model.
I kind of quite like the top 5 maybe or something like that. Yeah.
As well, because it keeps you focused on the importance of that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Probably a scope as well, obviously, with the consultancy, maybe there may be some scope for commissioners to have some discussions there as well with them. And also we can feedback what some of the major updates there are, maybe even informally, because again, it's such an evolving piece at the moment. We might as well just give you some more updates on it actually.
I think risk, we were talking about educating people on finance, weren't we? But actually, if we're going to develop a new system, educating everybody on that new system is going to be really important. And I think including the governing body, so that when you get these reports, you understand what you're looking at, and it helps you scrutinise them better. So I think, yeah, absolutely, there's a sort of a commissioner/member briefing aspect of this to make sure everybody knows what the format is and how to scrutinise it.
Yeah. Is that okay, Mayor, for that action? Fabulous.
I
Thank you.
check up.
Thank you, Wayne. That was really helpful. Okay, brilliant. Okay, moving on then. So I am in the internal audit action tracker, which would anything else we need to cover on that?
No, that was me again, and
Yeah.
that was a nice thing noted in a previous meeting of this committee that you get an annual update. I know TAA will come and ask for an annual update on any outstanding actions and audits. But it was noted that actually where's the ongoing update on outstanding actions. One of my departments does manage these on a quarterly basis. So any update that does come in, any audit that does come in, we put it into a system where we assign an owner, start date and end date, and then we ask for quarterly updates. So this is really the summary of every audit that we have currently where we have live actions. And we've obviously marked the individual owner, will mark them into green, amber and red, and they are managed locally at the moment as well, based on the department where they're prioritised. What I did in the report as well, I did pull out the ones that have currently got an amber rating, just in terms of for awareness and to give a broad overview of what they were. The difficulty with some of these audits are obviously at a point in time when the audits were undertaken. These were priority areas. Obviously, in the last 18 months, been through complete wholesale changes in organisation where we've got culture review recommendation, thematic review recommendation. So some of these, while they were high priority pieces of work, the individuals are still trying to get the work done, but it's just a case of prioritisation and moving parts really. But that's the report was just to show really where we are with some of the key updates. Obviously, this will be now that these have all been pulled out as well. We can look at these as a senior leadership team and any really delayed pieces of work or anything that does hit the amber red mark. We can decide whether to progress that forward. So yeah, there are some audits where you've got some amber action where they're ongoing. And there is one red action.
Yeah, I couldn't quite get my head around the CCTV one because I wouldn't have thought it'd be that difficult because I kind of thought it was sharing CCTV externally, and then I realised it was actually sharing CCTV internally.
It's a procedure that's gone around and around a little bit in terms of there are some real key issues. So when the audit was undertaken in 2022, there was a review of the information and security management procedures, which were all ICT security GDPR procedures. And it was one of the ones that was out of date. So we took an action to progress and forward. There are some sticking points with it. So the first sticking point I would say is generally the fact that you've got, there were some queries around the usages, the approved usages and whether they were agreed at a point in time and could be expanded scope. There are some, the process itself, people are looking at obviously streamlining it, but we're obviously trying to get the right level of governance and approval for CCTV to be accessed. We obviously then got the assurance, the approval, who can and can't approve the use of CCTV. And I think a major one as well is obviously the retrieval of CCTV from appliances. It's become, we get a lot more requests for appliance CCTV now as due course when there are incidents. But also all our appliances have CCTV on the front and back. So blanket requests can be, or can we have everything from every appliance? And the process of retrieving CCTV is relatively manual in terms of the hard drives. We don't have a technologically advanced cloud-based download system. It's very much a manual retrieval of hard drives and bringing them back and downloading them manually and storing them, and somebody then manually taking them back to the station.
On links and the digital strategies.
Plugging them back in, yeah. And from what I've told, there is an online way of accessing the footage, but it's dependent on the appliance being close to the Wi-Fi. And it takes hours to download. So there are trials where we've tried to download it apparently attached to the Wi-Fi, and if that appliance has to go somewhere, then it detaches and the whole upload disappears. So we've even got debates down at which department's job is it to go to if we have one incident which is complex, 4 or 5 appliances or 5, 6, 7, 8 appliances, somebody's job is then to go around with a bag to collect manual hard drives and bring them back, and then do the uploading and things like that and taking them back. So it's a process that eventually we hit a level of
It's all right.
we hit a level of agreement with the procedure, and then it gets tabled, and maybe there's different personnel around the table each time, and obviously then it goes back round for further debate. That manual task is an unenviable task for a department somewhere or other, and the Dean would have been part of the conversations longer than I have. So I think we have, for reassurance, we have a CCTV procedure, and we will adhere to that until a new procedure is brought in. So any request for CCTV can and will get furnished. It's just a case of the procedure itself does have some complexities where, depending on the personnel around the table, there are some, and I think we've got another complexity around the corner where I think our current appliance CCTV may not be fit for purpose for much longer in terms of the technical hardware and even the software solution. So I think that's another consideration longer term in terms of a complete overhaul of appliance CCTV. So that procedure is still, there is a working version of the draft. I'm almost afraid to take it anywhere because of the debate. I think it will ignite, but I think that's inevitable now. There is a working draft of it. It's just certain agreements.
So the reality is, isn't it? You're always going to get 1,000 different views, but sometimes you've got to come down on it's probably the best we've probably got under the circumstances. Otherwise, we still keep having a red action for 2.5 years.
Yeah, like I said before, it's an action where there are certain decisions made in terms of ownership, and then obviously with the change of personnel, you almost need to.
So bearing in mind, we've got a new monitoring officer that technically, I presume, owns this.
I do now. I have inherited this problem.
Oh, really?
And you're going to ask me for when we're going to get it done.
That'll be the one.
Good luck.
The working version very much in draft with very little that needs doing to the version. However, the contents of said version, whether that needs a further discussion in terms of what we agreed, then is it still the case for now is probably where this action could be delayed, or it could actually be moved very, very quickly if it's a.
So I suppose the question is, isn't it? If you can have those considerations for the right people, update for the next Finance and Audit Committee around where we're going to go with this, because sometimes we keep problems, aren't you? And you kind of come up with that. Right, it feels like about the best we're going to get to.
I'd already asked for it to be an urgent matter, so the team know that it's one of my priorities, because we had the chief had a question explanation about it as well, about the process. So I am aware of that. I think I should have reviewed where we are, certainly by the end of the month. I think then we'll know how quick we can get this approved. I'd like it in place well before the next meeting, if I'm honest.
The interesting one as well is around the technology solutions going forward, because I can't believe it's not.
That's
the UK.
And that's why we might need to go for the 80-20 now, because we know the system is not great. We know it's a manual process. Let's get an 80-20 procedure in place that everybody can use. And then when that digital planning gets within, that can really look at the whole thing.
Yeah, 100%. So
She's got music Wi-Fi download and try. No. Okay, that's great. So we'll move forward on that one. Anything else from the report? No. Anybody else? No. Thank you. And then we've got, I think, the forward work plan.
So this is now a simply forward-looking document.
Yeah.
It's slightly different. You used to have the agenda items from previously and also ones in the agenda today. So we've taken all those out. So it's now focusing on the last 2 sets of meetings for this municipal year, which is December and March. But I just say that because I'm re-looking at all of this, this might change a bit.
Mhm.
But this is the best we've got as at today's date about what we think is going forward to you. All right.
Is everybody comfortable with that as it laid out? Lisa, you and I spoke, because you said you wanted the financial consultation paper brought forward a couple of months, is that right? No, she didn't say that one. She actually said she wanted another 6 months, but she's not having that either.
I should have done gesticulations then. Yeah, schoolgirl error, mic off. No, I think I'm comfortable with where it is at the moment. I believe that's the 12th of December.
Yeah, 12th of December at the moment, Lisa, and yeah, joking apart, we discussed it and you're comfortable. That gives you, well, it doesn't comfortable, but it gives time, but not, but still leaves pressure under there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I think we're happy to sign off and agree those. Subject to, Amanda, your caveat of any review. Okay. Anything else that I've missed at all? I'll go around the room. Lisa, anything for you?
No, thank you, Carl.
Scott, anything?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Make a change.
Okay, thank you for all the engagement. Really enjoyed the meeting and thanks for all the time. Lisa, you take care. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Dave.
Okay.